I would see the things around the country that would happen, but I've learned it doesn't matter what community you're in, it doesn't matter how safe your community is, it can happen anywhere. Because obviously for someone to do this, they have to have some sort of mental illness, and sadly we have people with mental illness all over the country.
Sheriff, were there any threats to anybody in the bar, any kind of indication something like this could happen?
We have actually no information about that at all. But again, we're very early on in the investigation.
Do you know what happened when that came inside, shot the security guard, and then kind of went in and started shooting? Is that what happened? Would you walk us through?
We actually don't know. I mean, we're interviewing multiple witnesses, but I can say no, we haven't got everybody together yet to really put that timeline together, and we'll certainly provide that as soon as we can get something.
Sheriff, do you have any thoughts at this time, any words you can share about your fallen colleagues?
You know, it's so tragic, and losing Ron, you know, we go to the gym together, work out together, is horrific and terrible, and it saddens our heart, but there's also parents of those 11 other victims in there whose hearts are ripped out tonight. And I know there's parents wondering, oh my gosh, you know, what was one of my children in there? Or was it my sister or my brother? So there's just no way to describe this. It saddens us all, and it tears at our hearts and emotions, as it should. And if we ever get to the point where it doesn't, then there's something wrong with us.
Sheriff, can you talk about after Parkland? There was a lot of questions about police not being active enough, and it does sound like your sergeant really was proactive. What was the thought process in the department after Parkland? How have things changed?
Actually, it changed for us after Columbine, years and years ago, and we trained with our fire department for active shooting, and our officers know when you get to a scene and there's two of you, or even just one of you, and there's shooting going on, you go in. And that's a change of philosophy of what it used to be. And we worked so well in our county. The Highway Patrol was here. When they made entry the second time tonight, there were Simi Valley officers, there were Oxnard officers, there were Ventura officers, there were sheriff's deputies, and there were Highway Patrol officers. Everyone comes together to solve the problem.
And just a clarification on the timeline here. From the moment that the first contact was made by police to the moment that the second contact was made by police, what was the time frame?
So the time frame, the first deputies arrived on scene at 11:22. They made entry approximately 4 minutes later. That's when Sergeant Heelys was shot. And it was, and I don't have the exact timeline, it was probably close to 15 minutes. They didn't hear any shots fired before they regrouped, got additional officers, and went back in. And there were people hiding in restrooms, there were people hiding in attics.
Do you have an idea of how many people were at the ball?
I have no idea.
Sheriff, what other scenes are you and your law enforcement partners investigating in relation to what happened here? What other locations?
None that I know of, but certainly when we find out who the suspect is, we'll go to his location and we'll work with our bureau partners to see if there's a connection there. But at this time, there's none other that I know of.
Was the suspect armed with multiple weapons, or was it just one?
Right now, as far as we know, there was only one handgun, but that could certainly change as we do a more thorough search of the building.
Can you clarify? You said the suspect was down when police entered the building.
The suspect was down with a gunshot wound when the officers went into the building. Yes.
The deputy was shot by the suspect after the.
We don't know who shot the deputy.
You know who shot the victim? Was it self-inflicted?
We don't know who shot anybody at this point.
Sheriff, can you describe the suspect, age, Caucasian?
I probably shouldn't comment on that at this time.
Even just an age?
It would be a total guess. It's a horrific scene in there. There is blood everywhere, and the suspect is part of that. And I didn't want to get that close and disturb the scene and possibly jeopardize the investigation.
Based on people who were trapped inside, can you comment on
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
did the witnesses say they were trapped inside for what was their reaction?
They're being interviewed by our by our investigators. I honestly don't know exactly what they said at this point. I wanted to get that information as soon as I could to you, and we'll continue to follow up.
The killer said it.
I have no idea what happened inside there.
Is this
Yes.
Thank you.
Can you?
Anything else?
Is there a message you want to send to his family?
I've met with them and talked to them. We spent time. I made sure I talked to them before we released a name.
When can we get another update with everything that's going on?
Well, by the time, I would say, an hour and a half maybe. I don't want to waste your time and have you come up and I don't have anything. You know, if we can get information about what the witnesses said inside or any additional on the suspect, we'll have our PIOs let you know. But I don't want to waste your time by bringing you if we don't have anything new.
How many know about mass shootings have you had in the county?
Mass shoot? I don't remember in my 41 years having a mass shooting.
Sheriff, what would you like us to know about the sergeant? What should everyone know about him?
Ron was a hard-working, dedicated sheriff sergeant. He was totally committed. He gave his all, and tonight, as I told his wife, he died a hero because he went in to save lives, to save other people.
Sheriff, one question here, and for those parents who are waking up to this and who are maybe frantically looking for their children, relatives, friends, what should they do right now? Where should they go? What number should they call? Can you talk us through
I
that?
believe we have a victims hotline, and the PIOs will give you the victims hotline number where they can call to check and just make sure.
And where were they transported? Were they all transported to one place? Injured?
They went to multiple hospitals.
Thank you, Sheriff.
Okay, thank you.
So we've just been listening to Sheriff Jeff Dean from the Ventura County Sheriff's Office giving us a little more information. This is maybe a little bit over an hour ago about the mass shooting in Thousand Oaks, California at a bar there. I just want to sort of clarify things a little bit because there had been kind of different information, and I want to make sure that I'm accurate. There had been some talk about what type of weapon the gunman could have used. Witnesses thought they heard some rapid gunfire. Some did. What the sheriff told the media was that no assault rifles were found, but they did find a handgun on the property, and obviously they're continuing to search to see if that was the only weapon used. But just to be sort of clear and specific.
All right. So we want to bring in former New York police officer Bill Stanton. He's joining us on the telephone to talk about this and what sort of the next steps are going to be in any type of investigation such as this one. Bill, thanks so much for joining us on this obviously tragic and horrific story that we are yet again living in this country. So as you understand it, police arrived on the scene while shots were still being fired. What is the first thing? We have heard a little bit of information about this hero sergeant, Ron Heelys, who rushed into the bar along with a colleague from the California Highway Patrol. Just give us a sense of what the training is for officers when shots are being fired in a location like this.
Well, different departments have different tactics. You know, years ago, it seems like only yesterday, where they would set up, make an assessment, and then wait for an SRT team, a strategic response team. Now, if you're in law enforcement and you hear those shots being fired, you know, I would say the overwhelming majority of officers are going to go in. You know, that's, you know, what we're made of. And our training, you know, compels us to do so. But you don't want to go in blind. You want to gather as much information as possible.
So when you heard what Sergeant Ron Heelys did that seem to you to sort of jive with what the current policy is and what current training is like? That, you know, he got there, he was one of the first officers on the scene. There was another officer. He realized that people were inside and the gunfire was still happening, and he went in.
Right. I mean, we take an oath to protect and serve. and you gather, as I said, you gather as much intel as possible. Does it sound like one gunman, two gunmen, multiple gunmen? Does it sound like semi-automatic, automatic, large caliber, low caliber, right? And you gather all this information, and you go in and you fight. You know, you put shots on target as best you can. And this man's a hero. You know, he went into the fray. He lost his life protecting others.
And I think, Bill, you know, it strikes me that your assessment of what police officers and first responders did, you know, just only a few years ago, obviously has changed because there have been so many mass shootings in this country over the last, 10 or 15 years, that the realization, I guess, across police departments and municipalities across this country is that the longer you wait, the more people will be killed because people, with nefarious intentions will enter establishments, sometimes with multiple weapons, in their possession. And you just can't wait anymore the way you might have been able to suss out a situation 10, 15, 20 years ago.
Well, I'll go to the movies on this. A couple of decades ago, if anybody remembers the movie Dog Day Afternoon, where they rob the bank and they go in with guns, and you have this long standoff, and then you have hostage negotiation because the priority then, or the footprint then was, they wanted something. It was a hostage. It was for political purposes. It was for money. It was for something. Now, it seems you have individuals with agendas just to destroy and kill. And as the motives changed, so have our tactics. Now we can no longer wait. It's active shooter. Active shooter, we have to be, do that dynamic entry, go in, and unfortunately, we're reacting. We're not going proactive. We're reacting to the stimulus, that being shots. And many times we don't have the time to gather the intel, to put us at an advantage. The only advantage law enforcement has is having superior tactics, and communication.
Bill, I want to drill down a little bit more on that, but I just want to put you on hold because is it Chris Martinez is standing by? Okay, our correspondent Chris Martinez is down there at the scene standing by. Chris, I know you've been reporting throughout the morning. What's going on there now? What can you tell us?
Well, at this point, we're starting to see, we continue to see a lot of law enforcement arrive. We just have an unbelievable number of law enforcement, police, sheriffs, the ATF now involved here, the FBI now involved here. We're starting to see a little bit of the crowd thin out. Some of the people who are here, and there's still quite a few around, are starting to trickle off a little bit. What I can tell you about them, though, we have some here that are speaking to media, some who I think maybe just feel compelled to remain here. Many of them very much have a look of disbelief and shock still on their faces. We've spoken to a couple people who say they just cannot believe this happened here at an event that they were at. It's such a popular event that they come to regularly. So a lot of folks here still really coming to terms with the fact that this actually happened. And making it very difficult is that they really don't know anything about the shooter. There was really nothing known at this point about the motive. There really are no answers here at all to speak of. And that's making it, I think, a little bit tougher for people as they try to make sense of this, which perhaps they'll never be able to in the long run. There are no immediate answers. And that's tough, considering that some folks here just lost a lot of friends in this terrible shooting tonight.
Yeah, Chris, and something we were talking about a little earlier, that whilst at this moment we don't have those answers, my guess is that over the course of the next couple hours, you and other of our colleagues will have some answers to the questions that a lot of people are going to be having as they wake up this morning here on the East Coast. Chris Martinez reporting from the scene for us. Thank you, Chris. We appreciate it. We'll check back in with you a little later.
Sure.
All right, let's go back to Officer Bill Stanton. He's a former NYPD officer. He's joining us on the telephone to talk about this. Bill, you just heard from our reporter, Chris Martinez, there that other federal law enforcement agencies are now on the scene out there in Thousand Oaks, California. Give us a sense of how federal law enforcement is going to be working with the local police officers there. I'm guessing that there's some kind of uniform, there's a standard operating procedure when it comes to interaction between the two departments and agencies.
Absolutely. The feds have resources and technologies that local police departments do not have. And, you know, they coordinate, and it's more times than not working hand in glove, you know, slight overlap, and they each strengthen each other by way of gathering intelligence, you know, looking at the perpetrator's electronic footprint, going into his phones, his computers, canvassing the area, you know, neighbors, etc. And you're going to have a pretty good profile by the end of today from the efforts of these law enforcement officers.
I wanted to just go back a little bit, Bill, when we were talking about the officer that went in, and you talked about the fact that, you know, for officers, they're in a reactive position, which is not the way that you want to enter a building like that. Is there sort of a checklist of things that you go through, a mental checklist? You walk into this building, you know there's gunfire. We don't know if the officer had any sort of familiarity with the bar, if he knew the lay of the land. But in those first, I don't know, 30 seconds that you're in there, what's going through an officer's mind?
Well, you default to your training. As a police officer, you get a certain amount of training. And then what I still do, is I try to go above and beyond. I go for extra training. And what you do is you do immediate assessment. You take the corners. You know, you're looking at people. People are rushing past you. People are hiding. Are those, you know, good guys, bad guys, multiple shooters? You know, you got a flip switches in your mind, and you just go. You know, there's what you see in TV and movies and then what you see in reality. Like, you'll see a lot of these TV shows, you know, that portray police officers, and I laugh. You know, I'm like, okay, that one got it wrong. All right, this group got it right, you know, on how they go in and they do these entries. But the combination of adrenaline, fear, emergency, all these things go through cops' minds when they're in those situations. And you could train all you want, but it's a whole different dynamic when shots are coming at you.
You know, and Bill, one of the things that is, I think, people who are watching this broadcast across the nation will be surprised to know is that the New York Police Department doesn't have a SWAT team, right? You have ESU, which sort of operates like perhaps traditional SWAT teams, but we don't have a SWAT team here in New York City. And so is there a difference in the way that your regular, you know, your sort of beat cop is trained, or do they receive some of the training that, for example, when we were looking at the resume of the sergeant who lost his life, Sergeant Ron Heelys, he had a lot of sort of anti-terrorism training, really specific tactical training for situations just like this, and sadly, it wasn't enough to protect him from, you know, one motivated individual who's shooting from what appears to be a defensive position because he can see who's coming in and out the door.
Wow, Vlad, that's an excellent question. All right, I can only give you, I'll speak personally. I was a retired NYPD cop, and, you know, we're some of the best trained officers in the world. So I had a certain sense of security until a mentor of mine took me under his wing and he started teaching me close quarter combat. I train out at Alliance Tactical, and you go into these shoot houses, and then you realize what you don't know. I was training with their SRT, Strategic Response Team. That's a new iteration, you know, otherwise known as a SWAT team, right, where you go in. Now, ESU has much of the same training. In my opinion, the difference is frequency. How often do these teams train? You know, you'd be amazed. Many times, more often than not, like I referenced Alliance, Ohio, a small police department. By my understanding, they train far more than larger police departments because they don't have the numbers of people to rely on. So you have them on patrol, but then they volunteer for this training. And I've trained with some of those guys. It is amazing how good they are. And then you go to the military, like the Navy SEALs, who train all the time. So the long answer to your short question, there are different levels of training, and the officer, as you referenced, apparently had higher levels. But when you're going into an unknown situation, an active shooter situation where there's packed with people, the officer is the responding officer or officers are at a deficit because they cannot return fire for for fear of hurting the people in between. The bad guy, that's what he wants to do. The good guy has to hold fire in many cases.
Yeah, I guess, when you talk about the level of training and the frequency of training, that speaks to the ability to, under pressure, just slip right, without thinking, slip right into what you were trained to do. But you need to it needs to be second nature, if you will, in order to do that in a situation like this. So, Bill, now moving forward, it looks like some people have left the area. Looks like obviously the building is secure. So what's going to be happening here? What are local law enforcement going to be doing? We see police officers, we see the sheriff's office, we see the FBI. How does this investigation proceed?
Well, right now they're going to secure the crime scene, gather the evidence, and most importantly, make sure that this person was a lone gunman, that he was acting as an individual. He had no accomplices. There are no potential secondary devices, possibly explosives, possibly communicating with other people. You don't know what you don't know, and that's why law enforcement's going to go out there to find out.
All right, Bill Stanton, you're a former NYPD officer. Thank you so much for providing that insight for us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Have a good and safe day.
Thank you. You too. Again, if you're just joining us here at the half-hour mark on CBSN AM, we're following a horrific and tragic scene in Thousand Oaks, California, where a gunman has opened fire in a bar, the Borderline Bar and Grill there in Ventura County, California, killing 11 people, killing a police officer. And we understand from police officials that the gunman is dead at the scene. Not clear yet if he took his own life or if he was taken down by police. They are certainly digging into it. No motive yet, no identity of the suspect, but something that we will be digging into. For now, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll have a whole lot more coverage on this. Our station, KCBS in LA, is in live continuous coverage, and we have a team of reporters on the ground. Stick around.
This is extraordinary. This is important.
This is an issue of national security.
This is
sure to be a high-stakes hearing.
This is some of the worst of Florence.
This is home.
Yeah, this is home.
This is what they have to contend with.
This is bigger, though, than opening up the borders.
This is something that has altered your life.
This is a really big deal.
This is historic.
This is what it's like covering a story here in China.
This. We begin with something very exciting.
I made it to the top!
Whoa, girl!
Johnny, all right? I'm fine.
So cool.
Fun things are important.
We were among those who go running with the bulls.
I like that.
So you're not turning, the car's turning.
Right.
What am I doing in this bathtub?
See the places you get to go on CBS this morning?
The biggest names in politics face the questions you want answered.
That is a very fair question.
I can't answer that question.
Thank you for asking that question.
Face the Nation Sundays.
So we're continuing to cover this mass shooting in Thousand Oaks, California, at a bar there last night. It was a bar having a college night, so there were a lot of young people there. They accept people at the age of 18 and up on that college night, and a lot of colleges in the area actually sort of bus kids in. A gunman walked in at around 11:20 and opened fire. We know that there are 12 victims, 11 civilians, 1 police officer was also killed, and the shooter is dead. We don't know whether or not the shooter killed himself. Police are still investigating, trying to determine just how he died. But this happened really within a short period of time. It was 11:20 when the call came in. 6 minutes later, the first officer entered that building in the hopes of stopping any further bloodshed. And shortly after that, it was over and a lot of damage done.
We've been talking to witnesses. Our reporters on the ground have been talking to some witnesses. We want to roll out some sound of a couple of the survivors who were able to get out of that situation, including one man who says it wasn't the first time that he's been involved in an active shooter situation. Take a listen to this.
Just did everything I could to try and make sure that people coming out of the building were going in the right direction. If they were hurt, that we're doing whatever we could to get them going in the right direction, to get treatment. We knew his staging was not close, so that people that needed urgent attention needed to get taken to the staging area. And after we took, a buddy of mine took the guy with the gunshot wound to the staging area. We went back closer, and we're just waiting to see if there's anyone coming out that need our help.
And from what I understand, this isn't the first active shooter situation you've been in?
Yeah, unfortunately, it's the second time in about a year and a month that this has happened. I was at the Las Vegas Route 91 mass shooting, as well as probably 50 or 60 others who are in the building at the same time as me tonight. It's a big thing for us. You know, we all are a big family, and unfortunately, this family got hit twice.
That's remarkable to hear a survivor of a mass shooting say that he's a survivor of another mass shooting.
Yeah, it's an odd coincidence, but just to remind everybody that the Las Vegas shooting happened at a country music concert, and this was a country music, it was country college night at the bar. So a terrible coincidence for him and everyone else, but that might have been sort of the common thread there.
Yeah, for sure. Joining us now is Captain Brian McGrath of the Ventura County Fire Department. He was one of the first responders who arrived on the scene there. Captain, thank you so much for joining us. I know it's extremely busy today for you. Just describe the scene that you came upon when the mass shooting began to occur.
Well, I wasn't the first responder to get on scene, but when our apparatus got on scene, they quickly identified an area of safety that they could go to, while the sheriff's officers and the deputies on scene were able to secure the scene.
So, you know, usually the fire department, they're the first on the scene when there's a 911 call. You often get there ahead of ambulances. What sort of injuries did you see?
I was, like I said, I was not the one that was first going in. So I haven't had a chance to talk to the personnel that went right in.
You know, Captain, we noticed in some of the video, I don't know if you can answer this question or not, a lot of people without their shirts on. Do you know if people were, you know, getting involved, taking off their shirts to turn their shirts into tourniquets or trying to help out?
You know, that's what our general feeling is, but right now we can't answer that for sure. We do know that some people had to break windows in order to get out. One gentleman said he had to wrap his hands so he could break the window so he can get out, so that was also a part of it.
Captain, we understand from Sheriff Jeff Dean that several people went to different area hospitals. How many hospitals are in the area that somebody could get to with reasonably short amount of time?
Well, as of right now, we had 3 hospitals that were impacted, with 23 people that walked into the different hospitals within the area.
Okay. And do you know the nature of their injuries at all?
They were all relatively minor injuries. So they were able to self-extricate and walk away from the scene. Some got into vehicles and drove to surrounding cities to get to those hospitals.
And what's happening at the scene now? You know, we know that the gunman is deceased. We don't know, or maybe you know better than us, we don't know whether or not he killed himself. But what's happening there now?
Well, right now, we created a family center for any family and friends to go to, so we can collect anybody that has a possible missing family or loved one. And they are meeting in one location away from where the actual incident is. At the incident, we are assisting law enforcement with any logistical needs they need. Fire side is winding down, but we're going to remain on scene to assist law enforcement with whatever they need with their investigation process.
Yeah, a lot of people might not know what role the fire department would play in a situation like this. What sorts of things are you doing?
Well, as you know, first responders, we're like you said earlier, the first ones to come into the scene with law enforcement. We have additional training active shooter training that we can deploy with law enforcement officers to go into these scenes while it's still actively going on, so we can do the best we can at saving the most lives.
That's really interesting because you're not armed, right?
No, we're not armed. We do have bulletproof vests, and our ideal is to have at least a minimum of 2 law enforcement officers with us, assisting us into an area, and they're our protection, and we go in and we essentially stop the bleeding and get the people out.
Captain, one of the reports out there suggests that this individual may have used some kind of smoke device. What's your understanding of devices like that? Perhaps you're familiar with the one that was used in this establishment, and are they readily available? Are you able to just buy them at, I mean, I know, for example, fireworks are illegal here in New York City. I'm not sure what the law is in California. Is it considered a firework, or is it more of the military type, flash bang type device that you may have heard was
Glad
used?
we want to point out that witnesses are saying that there might have been a flash bang thing or smoke, but authorities haven't said that yet.
That's why I'm asking, yeah, see.
There's a lot of rumors going around right now, and so I can't confirm or deny any kind of other devices being going on. The sheriffs are going to have to relay all that information.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Thank you, Captain Brian McGrath. We really appreciate it. I know it's a really busy day for you there today. We appreciate your time. Thank you.
Of course. I would also like to thank all the other agencies that came out, Los Angeles County and Los Angeles City, that came out to support our agency while we needed help in these times of need. Yeah, no, we've been talking about this, especially in light of the information that Sheriff Dean shared with us, the loss of life of Sheriff Ron Heelys. All of you are heroes for what you do, given the times and the circumstances that we live in today, where these things are becoming all too familiar to Americans. I don't know if you heard, right before we came to you, there was a young man who was on the scene who also survived the Las Vegas massacre back in October of last year. The idea that there are now people who will survive multiple mass shootings, even though this is just one case, is something that is absolutely unheard of. And so understanding all the work that you do, we are so appreciative, and we're really grateful you spent some time with us here today on CBSN. Thank you. Of course, and thank you very much. I appreciate it. And our hearts and prayers do go out to everyone that lost their life today, and continues to go out to the loved ones that continue to go through these incidents and are affected by them.
Yes,
Great,
sir.
thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Captain McGrath.
I just want to point out that the president has tweeted, and this might be just part 1 of his tweet. I've been fully briefed on the terrible shooting in California. Law enforcement and first responders, together with the FBI, are on the scene. 13 people at this time have been reported dead. Likewise, the shooter is dead, along with the first police officer to enter the bar. But then it's ... So there might be another follow-up tweet to go with that.
So our station in California, in Los Angeles, KCBS, is in continuous coverage. Are we going to go to them, or are we?
All right, so our correspondent Carter Evans has also been on the scene all morning long talking to witnesses, and we want to play a little bit of that sound for you right now.
And it was just a regular night here. I come here almost every Wednesday. It's college night, local bar. You can get in at 18, so this is kind of where we all congregate. It's fun. It's a healthy environment. These people are all my family. I was in there, probably only been in there for half an hour, maybe 40 minutes, still saying hi to people, still getting the night going. And then I heard shots, and that's not a noise that you mistake for anything else. Loud music, and I heard the shots and looked to where the shots were coming from. And saw a tall, probably 6'2", 6'3", figure dressed in dark clothing with a handgun, and he was opening fire on whoever was standing behind the front counter that you pay to get in. You pay the cover fee to get in.
Did he seem like he was targeting anyone in particular?
I probably saw him for maybe 2 seconds, 3 seconds at most before I went into protection mode, and it was whoever was right there behind the counter, and then in that close vicinity to the front door. After that, I grabbed as many people as I possibly could around me, everyone, and got them below the pool table that we were standing to, because that was the largest thing, until we hear the shots stop or pause. At that point, I knew he was reloading and that there's not much he was going to be able to do. So I jumped up and I looked down, further down along the back of the bar is all glass, and I saw someone throw a bar stool through the window and followed suit, and I threw a bar stool through the window, and we just pushed people towards the bar so that they weren't in the direct line of sight of him, and then just filed as many people, everyone that was there in that area, out through that back window. And then after we had gotten everyone, the few boys that were shuffling people through, we basically jumped out the window and then just pushed everyone down the side along the fence towards the parking lot.
It sounds like it was a chaotic scene in there, and by all descriptions it was. You were inside with him. What's your name, and when did you know that there was a shooting going on?
My name's Cole Knapp, and I was standing right next to him. I had a clear line of sight of the front. I saw somebody walk in, but it's normal because there's people coming in all night. And I saw him draw something. I wasn't really focused on him. As soon as the first shot went off, the first thought through my head was somebody had an M80 or something, but then I saw he had a firearm drawn, and he continued to fire at the lady at the front desk. And he continued.
Some have said that there might have been a smoke bomb or some sort of smoke screen involved.
I didn't see anything.
By the time that he may have deployed it, may not. We both looked at him for a split second, and then we were like, we're getting these people out of here, not worried about what he was doing. We were just made an exit and got everyone through there. So I definitely have heard that there was a bunch of smoke bombs, and people that stayed in there longer and hid in various spots of safety. There were smoke bombs, I'm sure.
Have you been able to reconnect with all of your friends?
Most of them.
Most of them? Not everyone?
We're missing 2 close friends, and I've had no word on them for a good part of however long it's been. The last thing I heard from them was goodbye. They were going home.
Okay.
And
but you've tried to call.
Their other friends that they came with had just made it out the door, and they had stayed a little bit longer to say goodbye to me, catching up. And that's the last thing I heard from them was goodbye.
How many people were inside when the gunshots rang out?
Probably 100 to 130 people. A regular, probably a lighter night.
And describe the scene there. You say you pushed everybody down to the ground and got under the pool table?
So basically everyone kind of congregates in that area, and everyone went against the walls as far as they could and down as far as they could, because a lot of these people here are familiar with firearms. They know what situations happen, and so they know what to do. They know how to be the smallest target possible. And we were focused on shielding all the girls that we could to just get on top of everyone that didn't have any defense, which basically all of us didn't have anything, and so we waited there, making sure everyone was quiet, trying to draw as least amount of attention to us as we could. And then when that break came, we got through the glass and we pushed everyone to the street, and then just came back and we're pulling stragglers from the parking lot that were panicking and calling people and just telling them that you can't be here, it's not safe, that he's still in there, you need to get out.
By all accounts, there were dozens of shots fired. Do you have any indication of how many shots were fired? And did you see him targeting anyone in particular?
The only person I saw him targeting was the woman behind the front desk. After that, I did what he said, tried to get people out of there. The total amount that I heard was probably 30 total. There was an initial grouping of firing and then a pause to what I assumed he was reloading. And after we had left the building, we were going back to find more people to get to safety. And there was what seemed to be an exchange. And that was the last we heard, so probably a total of 30.
And did you see that sheriff's deputy and that CHP officer go inside the bar?
When we were pushing out, he actually ran and grabbed his attention and told him what was happening, and he took off in that direction.
That was you?
There was a CHP officer that had pulled somebody over for a traffic stop right there. I got to him, screamed to him, saying there's a shooter in the bar. He kind of was like indifferent about it for a second, and then he realized I was being serious, and he then went over there, and that's when I went back to go find him.
Okay. And did you see him go inside the bar?
I did not see him go in.
Okay. So do you know if authorities, police were able to engage this gunman with gunfire?
I would assume with the amount of rounds that went back and forth that someone engaged with him. I don't know if anything was successful. We haven't heard anything. We've been here for hours and we haven't heard word on what actually has happened. There's not much. We got people as far away as possible, and we pushed the boundaries of what was safe, just because I know where I'm going if I die, and I want to make sure that there's other people that had another chance to get themselves in line with where they need to be before they die.
We hear that the shooting lasted about 3 minutes, but
yeah, it was he was definitely not the fastest at reloading, which I was very thankful for, because it took us, I was sitting there shuffling people through for at least 15 or 20 seconds before I heard shots come again, and that was right when we got out the window.
Did the bar have security at all?
The bar has security, but they're not armed. A lot of them are regulars that come to the bar that have decided that they want to take on larger guys that they have training, but they're not armed. It's not a threat that we normally face.
They're just big guys that the average person would look at and say, I don't want to mess with that guy.
Did you see them engage this guy at all?
I did not.
Okay.
Everything was too chaotic before anything.
I didn't know who was who. I saw the people that were within arm's reach of me, trying to get them out. I know a lot of the guys that are security here, and I know at least a couple of them did everything in their power to make sure that other people didn't get hurt.
So all of this happened in 3 minutes. How long did it feel to you?
Like eternity.
It seemed like hours.
Yeah. Everything.
I just kept trying to go back in there, getting yelled at to get the hell out of there, and I was really, as much as stupid as it sounds, I really didn't want to listen to anyone. I just wanted to go back in there. My life is...
Were you able to see back inside there after all this was over?
The most I saw, we got closer than a majority of people were able to. The most I saw inside the bar was there was a line of sheriffs with rifles, and inside I saw what looked like just a tack light flashlight shining across the bar, but that was the most I saw inside.
I mean, this is becoming a common occurrence here in this country. Did you ever think you'd be in this type of situation?
No, it's something that you see on the internet, on the news all the time now, and it's something that you look at and say, oh, that's tragic, and you pray for those that were there and who were affected, but you think to yourself, oh, that'll never happen to me.
What was it like inside the bar? Was it dark? Was it light?
The bar's darker. The outside is even darker, which bothered me more because I didn't know if it was was more than a one-person attack, and they were just waiting for everyone to get out. And so my goal was to keep everyone that I was with as hidden as possible, basically hiding them behind the cars and the trash cans and everything that we could. And my focus wasn't really to find out what was going on inside. It was to make sure that what was going on inside didn't affect what was the people that I was with.
I saw sheriff's investigators with flashlights right down the embankment there.
That's exactly where we jumped out, yeah.
So that's the bar, the building is right up against the on-ramp to the freeway here.
Yep.
Okay, so presumably they were looking for more victims in the bushes. I heard people were hiding in the...
More victims, or I would assume, yeah, like the gunman who was hiding, he very well could have shed his dark clothing and dropped his gun and gone in with the rest of everyone else.
Wow. Well, you guys have been through a really traumatic experience. Thank you for taking the time to talk with me, and I'm glad that both of you are well, and I hope that you're able to get in touch with those two friends that you haven't been able to reach. Really good luck going forward, and thanks for talking to us.
Unbelievable story from those witnesses there. You know, this bar was packed with college kids, a couple of them celebrating their 21st birthday when the shots rang out. And you heard it. It really was a short period of time, maybe 6 minutes maximum, that the shooting occurred.
Yeah.
And there was that much damage.
Yeah, I'm looking back to the quote that we heard from Sheriff Jeff Dean. He said it was a horrific scene inside the bar. There was blood everywhere. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll play out some more sound from survivors on the scene. And we'll tell you what the president is saying about this on Twitter. We'll be right back. All right, we are following, unfortunately, something that has become all too common in this country, a mass shooting at a bar in California. This happened at the Borderline Bar and Grill in Thousand Oaks, California. 11 bargoers, 11 patrons of that bar were killed by a shooter. One police officer who responded to the scene immediately rushed into that location to try and save lives. He was killed as well. Sergeant Ron Heelys, a 29-year veteran of the Ventura County Police Department. No information as to motive, no information as to the identity of the shooter who is killed. He was killed at the scene. No information as to whether he was killed by police officers or if he took his own life. That is information that we are still digging into. We have had an opportunity to talk to some survivors. Our reporters are on the ground. The President of the United States has tweeted, "It's early morning here on the East Coast." This is the tweet. There are two parts. I have been fully briefed on a terrible shooting in California. Law enforcement and first responders, together with the FBI, are on the scene. 13 people at this time have been reported dead. Likewise, the shooter is dead, along with the police officer to enter the bar. Great bravery shown by police. California Highway Patrol was on the scene within 3 minutes, with the first officer to enter, shot numerous times. That sheriff sergeant died in the hospital. God bless all the victims and families of the victims. Thank you to law enforcement. And by all accounts, we heard from Sheriff Jeff Dean describing his friend, 29-year veteran of the police force there, Ron Heelys, as just an amazing individual and one who was studying to pursue more interest beyond the police department, but was heavily, heavily trained. So that's what we know about what's going on in Ventura County. The fact that the President of the United States tweeted about this, the President's had a busy couple of days yesterday in a press conference, unlike any other press conference anybody in the White House press corps, to the people that I've been communicating with, and I've talked to several of the reporters who were there, they've never seen anything like this. And then after that press conference, the President firing the Attorney General. Now, a lot of people knew that this was coming, but it was still sort of a surprise because it only happened a day after a historic midterm election.
Also, he was asked directly in that press conference about the security of Jeff Sessions' job, and he was vague about it. He sort of pivoted, and then we get the release of this resignation letter, which clearly states that it was a resignation that was requested by the president.
Right, and the other news that came out of that press conference, and we'll play that for you throughout the course of the next hour here on CBSN, but one of the reporters there, CNN's Jim Acosta, got into a bit of a verbal tussle with the President of the United States and asking him some very, very difficult and tough questions, as is the right of the press to do so. And later in the day, we learned that Jim Acosta's hard press pass, which means that's the pass that he has had since he's been covering the White House, which is not just during the Trump administration. He was also a White House correspondent during the Obama administration. That has been revoked. Sarah Sanders releasing a statement saying that the revocation was happening because Jim inappropriately touched the woman who was trying to pull the microphone.
Right. There was a little bit of Jim Acosta was asking the president a question. The president no longer wanted to answer the follow-up question. An aide or an intern moved to take the microphone out of Jim's hand. Jim sort of stood firm. And then, the White House suggested that Jim might have brushed her or hit her. CNN is saying that absolutely did not happen. Either way, the result was him getting his White House pass revoked. But that wasn't the only sort of combative interaction that the president had in that press conference. There were other reporters there that he seemed to really push back against.
Yep.
So we're going to dive into that as well.
We're going to dive into all of that. But for now, we're going to take you to our station in California. KCBS, they're covering this mass shooting casualty event in Thousand Oaks. We're going to take you to them.
To create chaos. It's just unconscionable.
And thank you again for joining us. This is CBS 2 News. At just before 5 a.m., we want to thank you for joining us. Unfortunately, we have devastating news this morning. There's been a mass shooting at Borderline Bar and Grill in Thousand Oaks. 13 people are dead. That includes the gunman. The 12th person was a deputy who went inside to try and stop the situation, try to save people. Unfortunately, 11 patrons who were inside the bar have passed away. The sheriff describes the scene as devastating and horrific, blood everywhere. And even when he was talking, he was in mourning for his colleague, Sergeant Ron Heelys, a 29-year-old veteran officer who was set to retire in a year. A Moore Park resident survived by his wife and son. Sheriff Dean told his wife that the man died a hero because he went in to save lives and rescue people, knowing that gunshots were ringing out. It was rapid fire. The gunman has not been identified yet. People who were inside the bar who saw him before the shooting say he just looked like another patron, that nothing stood out. People who saw him after the gunfire began said that he was wearing a hoodie, that he either had a beard or his face may have been partially covered, but he did set off smoke bombs, so it is hard to see. Now, people who were inside the bar were celebrating college night. It's every Wednesday night at the bar, and it's for 18 and over. And we have some sound of when the shots were ringing out from a witness at the scene. We're going to listen in.
And my son thought it was a joke. He didn't think it was real.
believe we're also going to listen into Sheriff Jeff Dean from the Ventura County Sheriff's Department as well. At this point, you could see it's still a lot of outpouring of grief, people showing up to the scene, trying to comfort one another, and certainly we want to give all of those people space. A lot of these people said they wanted to speak with us. They wanted to share their stories and explain what happened inside, and to also try to get word out about their missing loved ones. And that's what's so heartbreaking, is we heard from that father, Suzanne, who's looking for his son Cody, his firstborn son, who has not been found, and they're still trying to figure out where he is. His friends are looking for him. They're at the Reunification Center trying to get answers, and as you can see right there, it's just such a difficult time for a lot of these people. This only happened about 5 hours ago, so it's still very fresh. Emotions are raw. People are still trying to process everything, and it's certainly going to be a very long and painful morning. All right, let's listen into, I believe we have that sound that we received for that father from earlier.
We heard shots firing, and my son thought it was a joke. He didn't think it was real. I knew it was real, so I just pulled him down and told the girls to the left. I didn't tell them directly, but I was just yelling, "Get down, get down." There was quite a few girls in a group, young girls, and I think they all got out, but they all got downed. And then he kept on moving to the right. He shot the front desk cashier. And then he went to towards the office and started shooting there. And I saw the people trying to jam into the office and close the door. I don't know what happened. And then he started shooting at the dance floor, walking toward the DJ booth at the upper level. And there was a lower level that the dance floor is, and he was shooting down on the dance floor.
Your heart just goes out to all these people. There was also a father who said that his daughter's Apple Watch is still pinging from inside the bar.
Oh, no.
Just horrific. Candace Crone is live at the Reunification Center. Candace, what can you tell us?
Yeah, a lot of somber hearts here. Several families inside of this Reunification Center. If we push in, you can see a couple of deputies there right at the entrance, but just behind those glass doors, the families are inside of a room where you can see the wooden doors that are closed. A lot of people just supporting each other, praying, sending their positive thoughts, and just holding out hope that they can get in contact with their sons, their daughters, their friends and family who went to Borderline last night. Now, I want to show you a picture of one of the young men who are missing. I did speak to the father of Cody Kaufman. You can see his pictures there, 22 years old. His father showed up here very emotional after getting the terrifying news that there had been a shooting at Borderline. And so he's been calling him, trying to get in contact with him. His phone has just been ringing, so he hasn't been able to get a hold of him. He said he did try to check out a couple of hospitals nearby, the trauma centers, to see if his son just showed up there, but he hasn't been able to find out any information. It's just very chaotic, obviously, with a lot of patients coming in needing to be treated. And so he hasn't been able to get any confirmation that his son is at a local hospital. And so he came up here hoping to just, with all the other families, just trying to encourage each other and stay positive. But I did speak to that father, Jason Kaufman, just a few moments ago, and here's what he had to say.
I am very emotional right now. Yeah, this is my firstborn son, and to lose your kid in a senseless way like this is pretty tough. And I hope that I hope you're out there, and I hope you're okay.
And family can do right now is just hope. He said that his son Cody is about to join the military, has a bright future, and so he's just heartbroken that he hasn't been able to get in touch with him, just holding out hope that he will get a call or will be able to find his son. But that's what a lot of the stories here, same situation. A lot of the people inside of this Reunification Center, fortunately, they are being supported by deputies, by the Red Cross is out here to making sure that this terrifying morning is as easy as it can be for these families. But that's what we're experiencing out here. Just a lot of devastated, heartbroken people, Peter and Suzanne.
Candace, thank you so much. We're going to go to our Cara Finstrom, who's also at the scene. Cara, what can you tell us?
With Ventura County Sheriff Department. office, I'm sorry, and you're telling me that you are in the midst right now of planning a procession to honor this fallen colleague of yours.
Yes, at 10 o'clock we're going to be having a procession from Los Robles Hospital to the Ventura County Medical Examiner's Office. It's going to go from Lynn Road to the 101 and all the way to Ventura.
Captain Ron Heelys, we know we've been talking about this morning, a 29-year veteran, and you were sharing just so loved within this department.
Absolutely, he was a mentor, he was a trainer, he was a cop's cop. The people that worked for him absolutely loved him, and he was a tactically sound deputy. When he heard the gunfire, he went in, and that's something we would expect from Ron. And no doubt, what his actions did saved others from being victims, saved us from having additional victims out here tonight.
And he is survived by a wife and a son.
Absolutely, and the void that they have in their family, I can't even imagine. And our hearts go out to them, and as well as all the other victims that tragically lost their lives last night.
And our hearts go out to all of you still out here, still trying to get this to be a safe scene. You're still going. Tell us what the sheriff's deputies are doing up just not very far from us right now.
Right now they're processing the scene. We're processing it, trying to identify those that are victims as well as the suspect, so that our investigation can try to figure out what possibly would have motivated someone to commit such a heinous, ridiculous, outrageous act.
What do you want the community here to know? Folks are just waking up, learning about this. Many of them, this is the first they've heard.
I want the community to know that we're going to do everything in our power to figure out what happened and try to get to the bottom of this, to see what motivated this madman to commit such a heinous act.
And let's just recap for the folks at home who are waking up. This happened at about 11:20 last night is when the first calls came in. What do you know at this point?
So at about 11:20 the calls came in. A few minutes later, Sergeant Heelys and a CHP officer were on scene. They heard gunshots and they went in to try to neutralize that threat. He was an active shooter. They tried to neutralize that threat. At that point, Sergeant Heelys was struck by multiple rounds. He was transported and succumbed to his injuries.
And at that point, I know there were many others wounded. At this point, the last count we had was maybe 20 others injured, a total of 13 dead. That's including the gunman. Are those the latest numbers you have?
Those are the latest numbers that we have. However, there are many people that self-transported to local hospitals. So that number may change, but that's what we have at this point.
Do you have any feel for the range of injuries for the people who were hurt?
I don't know either their status or the range of injuries. I don't think that they are life-threatening injuries.
What can we expect here today? This is all still sealed off, a lot of police activity underway right now.
This is going to take a long time to process this scene. We're meticulous in the way we process it to ensure that we don't overlook any bit of evidence that helps us understand what it is that happened and get to the bottom of this, to get some answers. For all those families out there, for Sergeant Heelys' family, we need answers.
Our condolences to the whole office.
Thank you.
The procession, again, just to recap, underway. Later on this morning, you're still planning and getting all the details together for that?
Yes, the procession will start at 10 o'clock at Los Robles Hospital and then proceed down Lynn Road to the 101 freeway northbound to the medical examiner's office in Ventura.
Okay. Thank you for joining us. I appreciate it. So full honors will be paid to that sergeant who lost his life trying to save the lives of others here this morning. Back to you.
He is certainly a hero. Thank you very much, Carl. We want to go now to our Christy Fajardo, who is live at Los Robles Medical Center, where a lot of the victims were treated as well. That's also where Sergeant Heelys was taken earlier and passed away. Christy?
Yeah, that's right, and it's a very somber scene here. Many of Sergeant Heelys' colleagues have been coming in and out of the hospital, no doubt to lend their support to his widow, but also road here where we are at 9:30 so that law enforcement can make their way in. And we want to go ahead and show you a photo of Sergeant Ron Heelys. He was of Moore Park, and he selflessly and courageously charged in when he heard gunfire, and he was struck multiple times. The CHP officer tried to save him, pulled him out of the bar. He was brought here to Los Robles Hospital, where he was pronounced dead just a couple of hours ago. He was also set to retire in a year or so. Sheriff Jeff Dean choked up when he spoke about the sergeant. He said he gave it his all, and tonight, as I told his wife, he died a hero because he went in to save lives, to save other people. And certainly people are describing him that way here this morning, as a hero. We're seeing condolences coming in from police departments around the country, and also there's a huge outpouring from the community who has also been touched by his death. So no doubt there will be a lot of people out for the procession, which again starts at 10 a.m. but at 9:30 a.m. police are going to start shutting down some of the roads. As for the other victims, we know that multiple victims were brought here to this hospital, but so far the hospital has not given us any information. They are no doubt very busy tending to all of the wounded. We do know, though, that some families are still in limbo. There was an uncle who actually came here to the scene, and he was desperately looking for his niece. He could not find her. He said that her Apple Watch was still pinging, that she was inside the bar. He was hoping, though, that somehow she just left it behind in all of the chaos. So he was going from hospital to hospital trying to find her. But so far, he wasn't able to get any answers. Let's send it back to you.
Thank you, Christy. This is just such a devastating morning. 12 people killed at the club, including that sheriff's deputy she was just talking about, 29-year veteran, and 11 people inside the club. We know their family members are probably hoping that they're in the hospital because about 20 people were transported there as well. A deadly shooting at a club that's been there for 25 years in Thousand Oaks. The Borderline Bar and Grill. Our own Danielle Gersh has been there. Candace Crone. Parents that we've talked to at the scene who are looking for their children say they've gone with their sons and daughters. We talked to one father who was there with his son last night. And when the shooting started happening, they both went separate directions. People just scattered to all corners of the club. The father ran out front, and he said he has some survivor's guilt this morning because he regretted not going back in to try to save people. But it's just such a heartbreaking morning. Sergeant Heelys heard the call. So did CHP officers who were on a nearby traffic stop. They all went to the scene. While shots were ringing out, Sergeant Heelys was hit by gunfire. A CHP officer was able to take him to safety and out of the line of fire, but unfortunately he died at the hospital where Christy's at 2 o'clock this morning.
We should also mention that Sergeant Heelys knew the danger he was facing. Right before he went inside the nightclub, he even called his wife to tell her he loved her and that he was going inside and that he had to go. So he knew the danger he faced. And that just goes to show you how vital law enforcement is and how grateful we are to everything that they do to protect us. And even though he knew the danger he faced, he and that CHP officer went inside to try to rescue people. You mentioned, Suzanne, that there are parents who are now looking for their children, and one of those parents we spoke with, Jason, he's looking for his oldest son named Cody Kaufman. He held up a photo of Cody on his iPhone, just hoping for answers, his friends as well. A lot of people just trying to figure out if their loved ones are alive or if they're dead. We know at least 12 people have been shot and killed. That does not include the gunman. But a lot of people were inside that club, about 200 in fact, all from different colleges. Some brought their parents. We know that Pepperdine, Cal Lutheran, Cal State Channel Islands, and also Moore Park College, they all had students who were inside at the time at Borderline trying to just enjoy themselves, line dance as they normally do on college night on Wednesday nights.
It was just upset by a barrage of bullets, and we have video of the moments when the shots were ringing out. We'll have a listen.
We use the word chilling, and that's the only way to describe it, chilling. It's horrible to think that this was something that happened to innocent people, and in fact, a lot of the people who were inside at the time said they thought it was firecrackers. They thought it was a joke.
Yeah, somebody thought a speaker was crackling, and the person who thought it was a speaker, He says he was at the Route 91 festival in Las Vegas and survived that shooting. Sheriff Dean described it as a horrific scene inside. He said there's blood everywhere. He says this is just a tragic situation, that he's been a cop for 41 years and never thought he would see the things around the country that would happen. But he says he's learned it doesn't matter what community you're in. It doesn't matter how safe your community is. Thousand Oaks is known as America's safest city. He says it can happen anywhere. And his voice cracked when he talked about his colleague, Sergeant Ron Heelys. He says they worked out together. He knew him for decades. He was the one to call his wife and let her know that he had passed away, that he said that he died a hero. Now his widowed wife has to take care of their son. I'm sure they're in mourning this morning. And then we have the families of 11 people inside the club who are probably praying and hoping that their family member is at the hospital instead of their lives being cut too short.
There's going to be a lot of heartache, not just throughout the day, but forever for a lot of these people. And one of the things that the word terrorism was thrown out by Sheriff Jeff Dean. He said they don't know yet if there is a terrorism link, but it does seem that this attack was planned. It didn't seem spontaneous based on the fact that the gunman came in prepared. He had smoke bombs that he used to create chaos and force people to go out to one side of the building, and a lot of people didn't know what was going on. They couldn't see, and that's why several of the people who were injured were trampled. People had cuts, people trying to escape through the windows. They used chairs and bar stools. We spoke with a young woman who said that she was trampled on, but somebody actually picked her up and tried to get her to safety. So there are stories of heroism, which is comforting to know that there are people who, in the face of danger, still put their lives on the line to help others, and we're prepared to make the ultimate sacrifice.
And we're going to listen in to the press conference given by Sheriff Jeff Dean earlier this morning.
Good morning. You're all experienced reporters, and you understand this is dynamic, ongoing investigation and a tragic, tragic situation. So I'll go through the details. I'll share with you everything I have, and we'll answer all the questions you may have. Our partners from the FBI and the Highway Patrol will also answer any additional questions you might have. Tonight at 11:20 p.m., Sheriff's 911 received multiple calls of shots being fired at the Borderline Bar and Grill in Thousand Oaks. Our first sheriff's unit arrived on scene 3 minutes later. There was also 2 Highway Patrol officers on scene who had been on a local traffic stop and heard the traffic and responded right away. Approximately 3 minutes later, a Highway Patrol officer and a sheriff's sergeant made entry into the Borderline because they heard shots being fired and felt there might be additional victims inside. Upon going through the front door, the sheriff's sergeant was struck multiple times with gunfire. The Highway Patrol officer stepped back and secured the perimeter until additional units arrived, and he rescued the sheriff's sergeant out of the line of gunfire. When additional units arrived, including SWAT personnel, agencies from the Oxnard Police Department, the Simi Valley Police Department, the Ventura Police Department, and additional officers from the Highway Patrol, they made entry into the Borderline Bar and Grill. They found 11 victims that had been killed. The suspect, who we believe was the only suspect, was dead inside. And there were multiple other victims of different levels of injury inside that were rescued from the scene and taken to local hospitals. In addition to the victims inside, and the numbers are upwards of 10 to 12, additional victims with minor injuries fled the scene on their own and took themselves to local hospitals. We have not identified the suspect yet. Our partners from the FBI were on scene almost immediately to help us with the identification process and with crime scene processing. We have no idea if there is a terrorism link to this event or not. As you know, these are ongoing investigations, and that information will come out as soon as we're able to determine exactly who the suspect was and what motive he might have had for this horrific event. I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have. Well, the Sergeant Heelys died at the sergeant passed away at the hospital about an hour ago. I only mentioned it might be terrorists because that's where we all go these days when we have multiple shootings like this. There's no reason for it, and we have this horrific death. I have nothing to lead me to believe, or the FBI, that there is any terrorism link here, but we certainly will look at that option.
Were there other devices inside?
I'm sorry?
Devices inside?
What do you mean by devices?
Reports that people thought there were smoke bombs that were going off.
There's some initial reports that a smoke bomb might have been used. We have not found anything yet. We actually we have called in our bomb team to go in through, and we have a couple bomb dogs here that are checking the area, but we haven't found any other explosive device or confirmation that there was a smoke device.
What does that make you think if there was a smoke device?
Hindsight and speculation is pretty easy. You would think if someone throws a smoke device that it was certainly more of a planned attack and not something spontaneous.
The sergeant, how long was he on the force? Anything about him?
Sergeant Heelys was on the force for 29 years, was looking to retire in the next year or so. He was a Moore Park resident and is survived by his wife and his son.
What is his name?
Ron Heelys, H-E-L-U-S.
Sir, what kind of weapon was it? What do you make of this?
Well, the question is, Thousand Oaks, the Safe Committee, what do I make of this? I make it that it's a horrific incident. It's part of the horrors that are happening in our country and everywhere, and I think it's impossible to put any logic or any sense to the senseless.
How did the suspect die?
With officers, or did he take his own life?
Well, when the officers made entry, the suspect was already deceased.
Was he included in the kill?
There were 11 victims. I will not count the suspect as a victim, the suspect, and then Sergeant Heelys.
So 11 victims.
11 victims, the suspect makes 12, and Sergeant Heelys makes 13. No, we have not.
What about the weapon? Was it
We have not found any type of assault rifle inside the location. The only weapon we have found that we believe was used was a handgun, but it's still early on and we haven't gone through the scene in detail yet.
Sheriff, do you believe the gunman died of his own death?
It would appear that way, but it's certainly well too early to know if he actually did take his own life. Well, certainly, we have to wait for the medical examiner to get here. We have to do family notification, so candidly, it'll be hours and hours.
Do you know if the suspect had visited this bar before? Has anybody said it?
We don't know anything about the suspect. We haven't talked to anybody that had any contact with him prior.
Lived here?
Well, I actually have no idea who he is. We don't know anything about him yet.
What about the ages of the victims? The ages of the victims, can you tell us that they were young?
I actually don't know what the ages were. It is a nightclub, so I would, speculate they were probably in the 21 to 26-year-old age group.
Can you talk about if active shooter training played a role in the sergeant, going in and finding the suspect immediately?
There's no doubt that the change in how we handle active shooters played a role. Sergeant Heelys and the High Patrol officer first on scene, they knew they had to take action, and they went in and did what they had to do.
One more time. 13 people died.
Yes, 13. We don't know how many are injured because they went to separate hospitals. I'm going to speculate, given what I've heard, somewhere between 10 and 15 additional injuries. And we don't believe there might be one additional gunshot victim, but we think there are other injuries, people trying to escape, breaking out windows, and doing different things.
When you see
Oh, you could just hear the emotion in his voice talking about Sergeant Ron Heelys, the 29-year veteran of the department, leaving behind a wife and son. 1 year away from retirement.
Just devastating. We're going to go to our Cara Finstrom, who is live at the scene right now. Cara, what can you tell us?
Well, we're here now with Captain Steve Kaufman with the Ventura County Fire Department. We just heard in that news conference a little bit of information about the wounded, the injured. It was the firefighters who rushed in, tried to help as this was all happening. Give us the latest information you have on the numbers of people who were hurt.
So 23 people total were taken to local hospitals. One of them was Deputy Heelys. And then 21 self-transported themselves, and then one other person was transported by ambulance.
Yeah, I think a lot of people imagine that there were a lot of ambulances taking the people who were wounded, who did survive, but in this case, people were just jumping into cars.
Correct. Yeah, we had 14 ambulances assigned to this incident, in addition to over 11 fire apparatus and almost 100 personnel. And one of the things that we found was that people started self-transporting to 3 different local hospitals.
Explain to us how this worked, because when you first arrived, there was still a shooter inside that nobody was sure if they were continuing to pose a threat or if they had died. So how did you work with local law enforcement here?
Sure. So our initial report when our units were dispatched was that it was a gunshot victim. While they were en route to the gunshot victim, it was updated that it was an active shooter situation with what we call as a multi-casualty incident. So our units got here real close to the same time law enforcement got here. And then what they did was, once law enforcement neutralized the scene, we do this thing where we call a rescue task force. And that's a couple firefighters and a couple law enforcement. The law enforcement provide protection for our firefighters. They go inside, and in normal situations, they'll triage and treat people. Unfortunately, both of our rescue task forces that went in, they were faced with 12 fatalities.
And then we know that Sergeant Ron Heelys died later at the hospital. A difficult day for all the firefighters as well. The first responders, you always work together. You're going to be taking part in the procession that is being planned for later this morning.
Correct, yeah. So they're going to move Deputy Heelys from Los Robles Hospital up to our medical examiner's facility. That procession is going to start at 10 o'clock at Los Robles Hospital, and it sounds like it's going to go down Lynn Road to the 101, and then it's going to take 101 up to Ventura to the medical examiner's office. And as we always do, our fire personnel and law enforcement will participate in that, and it's definitely for us, it's a heavy heart day. I mean,
it is. Our hearts go out to all your firefighters still here. And before we toss it back to you, Peter, Suzanne, I just want to give you a feel for where we are. If you take a look behind me, you can see a lot of different vehicles parked across the street. They've moved us up the block. Just beyond all of those Ventura County Fire Department and Sheriff Office vehicles is where the Borderline Bar and Grill is located. So still quite a force out here. We're told they will be out here for quite some time. Investigators still at the site of that Borderline Bar and Grill. Back to you.
Carl, we are just getting some new information, and authorities, we're told, have identified the suspect. They are not naming him at this point, but they do believe he used a .45 caliber handgun. And we're also hearing from law enforcement sources that he may have driven his mother's car to the borderline. So at this point, we're still waiting for a name, but again, authorities have identified that gunman, and they are waiting to release his name at this point.
Thank you, Cara. To update you, if you're just tuning in with us, it is 5:30 this morning. You're waking up to horrific news. There was a mass shooting at the Borderline Bar and Grill this morning in Thousand Oaks. 12 victims. One of them is a deputy who tried to go in and help the people who were fired upon. They were just out for a night of country line dancing. This was college night, so normally it's a 21 and over bar at night. Wednesday nights, it's for 18 and over, so a lot of college students were at this bar. We know students, yes, hundreds. We have students from Pepperdine and
Cal Lutheran, Cal State Channel Islands, Moore Park. And by the way, Cal Lutheran just announced that they are canceling classes today because of this horrific tragedy. I think we want to go to our Candace Crone. She is live at the Reunification Center. Good morning, Candace.
Good morning, Peter and Suzanne. Yeah, we're at this teen center here at 1385 Jans Road. This is where people need to come if they have a loved one, a family member, a friend who went to Borderline last night and they haven't heard from them. So if you take a look behind me, you can see there's several people, about 20 people inside of this reunification center, all glued to the TV, trying to get the latest information as quickly as they can. Many of them have tried calling their loved one who was at Borderline last night, but haven't been able to get a hold of them. They did ask the media to stay outside, so we're respecting their privacy during this very difficult time. But I've spoken to a couple of parents who tried calling their children over and over, as it was, college night. A lot of young people at Borderline haven't been able to get a hold of them. The phone just continuously rings, and so they are just on edge, as you can imagine. It's just unimaginable for these parents who cannot get in contact with their children. You can see a couple more people there going into the reunification center right now. The good news is that there is a lot of support out here, a lot of love, a lot of people bonding together, just sending their best wishes and thoughts and just encouraging each other as they're trying to get good news. They really do hope to reunify with their children, with their friends and family here. And so we're just hearing story after story just like that. Even the mayor pro tem is out here giving his encouragement, his support, telling people, that hang in there. The city is surrounding them with love and support and encouragement and providing anything that they need at this time. So that's what we're seeing out here. No, we haven't seen any family and friends reunify just yet. It's still very early, but we're hoping that these people are able to get in contact with their loved ones, Peter and Suzanne.
And we certainly do, Candace. And we also heard from a father who said that his daughter's Apple Watch keeps pinging from inside the bar. So we really hope that a lot of these folks find their loved ones. At this point, again, they are still waiting for word. Some of them don't know if their children are alive or dead, or if they're just in the hospital being treated for their wounds at this point. But certainly a heartbreaking situation still unfolding in Thousand Oaks this morning. Just a massive crime scene set up. You can see on the left side of your screen, law enforcement, both locally and nationally, federal law enforcement are on scene gathering information. Not only the FBI, but also the Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives Bureau. They're there. Local law enforcement, Oxnard Police, as well as Ventura Police and Thousand Oaks Police. They are all gathered at the scene trying to piece together what happened. Again, at this point, we do know law enforcement have identified the gunman. They have not named him, but they do believe that he drove his mother's car to the scene and used a .45 caliber handgun.
Well, that makes you think he might be somebody who's local, and this is a tight-knit community, one of America's safest cities. But unfortunately, a lot of parents are waking up this morning wondering if their child is okay, if they're at the hospital, or if they were one of the victims of the shooting. Candace Crone at the Reunification Center talked to Jason, the parent of a son who is missing, named Cody Kaufman, and Cara talked to one of his friends at the scene. So just that missing link, but hearing that same name just breaks your heart. You hope that he's being treated at the hospital and just left his phone behind. As law enforcement said, many people left their phones and their purses and their belongings behind because there was madness inside the club. There were smoke bombs going off. There were gunshots flying through the air. A father who was there with his 26-year-old son said he saw the gunman walk in, shoot the bouncer, and then shoot the cashier, who he said was just a young girl. This was 18 and over night at Borderline Bar and Grill. This is a night where they do country line dancing. Our own Danielle Gersh says she's been there on those nights, and it's a family atmosphere. It's a warm atmosphere that parents have passed down through the generations. Cody's father, Jason, says he went there back when he was a college student. It's been there for 25 years. This is a very intimate place where people go just to have a nice time. And when the gunman walked in, the people inside the club say that a young man named Cole said he saw the man walk in. He just looked like a normal patron. And then when he saw him raise his arm with a gun and start shooting, he said he just ran outside to the patio where people had no clue that gunshots were going off inside, and he helped people get to safety, dozens of them. Inside the club, people broke windows and threw bar stools and chairs through the windows because they were stuck. There weren't any doors to escape from.
And it's chilling to think, Suzanne, that the gunman didn't speak.
So we've been listening to coverage from our local station in LA, KCBS, of this mass shooting in Thousand Oaks at a bar there, a bar that was hosting a college night. So a lot of young people, including people as young as 18, 11 people shot, including a police officer. Also, the gunman as well is shot. So 12 victims total. The gunman is also deceased. We don't know if the gunman killed himself or not, but that's what's unfolding this morning.
Right, and the President of the United States has tweeted about this. We're going to throw the tweets up so that you can see them. He tweeted the first one: "I have been fully briefed on the terrible shooting in California. Law enforcement and first responders, together with the FBI, are on the scene. 13 people at this time have been reported dead. Likewise, the shooter is dead, along with the first police officer to enter the bar." The president tweeted a short time after: "Great bravery shown by police. California Highway Patrol was on the scene within 3 minutes, with the first officer to enter shot numerous times. That sheriff sergeant died in the hospital. God bless all of the victims and families of the victims. Thank you to law enforcement." So that was earlier this morning from the president. Our Chip Reed is standing by to talk to us about the president's tweet and what else he's learning about what the president may be briefed on. Chip, anything more you can tell us about what the president, we saw those tweets from the president of the United States. Do we expect to hear anything more from him on this?
I wouldn't be surprised, but his schedule does not show him appearing in public today. He's going to the Supreme Court in a little while for the formal investiture of Brett Kavanaugh as a Supreme Court justice, and later he's meeting in the Oval Office with Mike Pompeo, the Secretary of State. They presumably will be talking primarily about North Korea, but of course there will be other issues. The president sometimes will open up a meeting like that just briefly for a spray by cameras if he decides he wants to say something on camera, but at this point we don't have any indication he's going to do that. His at least publicly low-key day, we're guessing, will continue, because usually when something as horrible as this shooting in California, usually they keep it a bit low-key. They don't make a lot of news, especially now that these things happen with such frequency. Horrifying frequency, but you just never know with this president. He's very unpredictable. Perhaps he'll come out and make a statement, but at this point we don't have any indication of that.
So true. Speaking of being unpredictable, what we thought we would be probably talking about today is that Jeff Sessions is no longer the Attorney General. He submitted a resignation letter, or released a resignation letter yesterday, but as far as we understand it, he was forced out by the administration. That resignation letter did not have a date on it. What can you tell us about the timing of his departure, one day after the midterm elections?
Yeah, well, it wasn't a surprise, because the president has made very clear on multiple occasions that he is extremely unhappy that Jeff Sessions recused himself from the Russia investigation and allowed it to continue, or allowed it to start and continue, and has taken a totally hands-off posture on that. So, in fact, the person who's been put in, Matthew Whitaker, has argued on numerous occasions that he believes Mueller is exceeding his authority, and he even at one point said one way to deal with it is to cut his budget and see it grind to a halt. He also has a lot of power as acting attorney general to say that Mueller can't investigate this or can't investigate that or can't send a report to Congress or release it publicly. So there's plenty he can do. And as for who would replace him as the permanent attorney general, there are a lot of names circulating. And Rudy Giuliani is one of those. You can imagine if he gets in that position, there will be some real fireworks.
Indeed. Chip, you mentioned Matt Whitaker is now overseeing this investigation. But we were talking earlier to CBS News national security analyst Fran Townsend, and she said it is sort of something that she's never seen before, where you have the attorney general who resigns, and it's not the deputy attorney general, or at the very least, the solicitor general of the United States, to become the acting AG. What is the administration saying about why Matt Whitaker specifically was chosen, given that he is on the record numerous times through his television appearances and through articles that he wrote about exactly where he stands on the Mueller investigation?
Well, they're simply saying he's highly qualified for the job, and certainly he knows the ins and outs of the Justice Department as chief of staff to Jeff Sessions. But I don't think it takes a scientist or a political scientist to understand here that President Trump wants somebody loyal and who agrees with him that this is a witch hunt in that position. So what we're really doing is waiting for the next shoe or shoes to drop in terms of what they do at the Justice Department, whether it's Matthew Whitaker or somebody or the person who replaces him permanently to put a stranglehold or at least limit what Robert Mueller can do in this investigation. It may not happen today again because of this horrible situation in California, but I would think that something will happen soon. That certainly is the speculation among the press corps here at the White House, and a lot of the people who were speculating yesterday that he was going to move quickly to get rid of Jeff Sessions were right, and the people who are now speculating that the next step will happen quickly may be right too.
Yeah, well, you know, you talk about the president wanting someone loyal to be the next attorney general, and that person, whoever it is, whether it's Whitaker or somebody else, probably won't find any problems in the Senate, since the Senate is still, you know, a majority Republican, but the House is a different situation now. And, you know, the House may have some liberties, some powers maybe on the back end. Can we talk about what some Democratic House members may have the option of doing if they're concerned about who becomes the next Attorney General?
Well, for one thing, if whoever is the Attorney General or acting Attorney General prohibits Robert Mueller from releasing the report, they will certainly try to subpoena that report. It could also be leaked to the press. We just don't know. But it's almost impossible to predict what will happen here, but it's going to get ugly if they really do try to limit Robert Mueller's powers, and especially if they try to keep him from releasing this report. But I do think it's pretty certain that if Robert Mueller does not get to release a report, or if they severely limit what he can do, the House will say, okay, we'll step in and we will take over this investigation. They have subpoena power, and this will be a major investigation by the House. Numerous investigations are expected to pop up by various committees in this newly Democratic House when it becomes Democratic next year. And if Mueller can't continue or release his investigation, then I think you can see the House members saying, okay, we're going to have to fill that gap.
Chip, before we let you go, it seems as if the line in the sand, if you will, when it comes to Attorney General Jeff Sessions has been moved repeatedly. Senator Lindsey Graham of South Carolina was on the record last year saying that if the President of the United States tried to remove the Attorney General Jeff Sessions, there would be holy hell to pay. It would be the end of his administration. Clearly, Senator Graham is no longer saying that, because just a few weeks ago, he had a very different take on it. The question I have for you with regards to how the Republican senators and congressmen keep shifting their views is when it comes to Robert Mueller. There had been numerous points made by senators on both sides of the aisle that the special counsel's investigation should continue. Are you hearing from your sources that Republicans in the Senate, at least, are still holding to that they still believe that the special counsel should be left alone by the President of the United States?
I tell you, we're getting a lot of silence on that right now, Vlad. A lot of people are holding their fire, just as Lindsey Graham has kind of changed his opinion. There are a lot of people who fear this president, and they don't want to be the next Jeff Flake, the person who puts their head out there and gets it chopped off. So it's really up in the air. It's going to take a lot of courage on the part of Republican senators to stand with the Democrats to push ahead with the Mueller investigation when the president is clearly going to turn those people into the next Jeff Flake, if he can.
Right.
All right, Chip Reid at the White House for us. Chip, thank you so much. We appreciate it.
You bet.
All right, again, the president has been briefed on the deadly mass shooting in Thousand Oaks, California. We are going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to take you there to Thousand Oaks for the very latest. You're streaming CBSN.
We're continuing to monitor the investigation now into this mass shooting in Thousand Oaks, California, at the Borderline Bar and Grill around 11:20 or so this morning. A gunman walked into the packed bar. It was engaged in a college country night. A lot of young people there, and began shooting almost immediately. 11 victims. Also, a sheriff's deputy shot and killed, as well as the gunman also deceased. We don't know if the gunman shot himself or whether or not there was a firefight, because the witnesses, as you can imagine, in the chaos, were getting a lot of conflicting information.
That's right. We did have a press conference earlier from the police officials there, and one of the things that I think is going to be striking for a lot of people is just how quickly police were able to respond to the scene of shots fired, and how quickly that one hero that you mentioned, Anne-Marie, Sergeant Ron Heelys, who entered that bar, that establishment, knowing that there were shots being fired, knowing that people were being killed and injured, sadly lost his life in trying to rescue those. He was on the scene and in that establishment within 4 minutes of the shots of the shots fired notice. So,
right.
So that's what we're digging into. We don't have a motive yet. We don't know the identity of the suspect, but our station in Los Angeles, KCBS, is tracking developments. They're in continuous coverage. Let's go to them.
He was a block away when the call came in. He rushed to the scene, led in 2 CHP officers into the bar as the gunman was shooting, and unfortunately lost his life.
And you know, Suzanne, the part that tugs at my heartstrings is knowing he called his wife right before it happened, and he wanted to tell her he loves her, and then said, I have to go.
He knew what was
He
going
knew
to happen.
he was facing danger, but he went in anyway, and that's why we are so grateful to law enforcement and the fact that they put themselves in the line of fire for us and to protect us every day. All right, we did speak all morning long with witnesses who were inside and outside the nightclub when all this took place. Let's listen into some of what they had to say.
We just heard a bunch of gunshots, like maybe 5 or 6 gunshots, and we all kind of looked around, and then people started piling on top of each other, getting low to the ground. And we didn't know what was going on, and then we heard more gunshots, and then these incredible humans just jumped up and started smashing out the windows, and everybody was just like, jump, because we were trapped. We were completely trapped on that side, and so we jumped 2 stories down to the ground out these broken windows so that we could escape. And it was dizzying. It was completely dizzying, just trying to catch my bearings as I'm jumping out of this window, broken window with shards of glass, and following everybody out, and no one knew what was going on.
I was outside on the patio, and a guy I don't even know who had seen me there was like, get down. He threw me under one of the tables, and then you couldn't see anything because I guess there was smoke. And then one of the guys who was there, they started throwing tables out the window, and they picked us up and they threw me and my girlfriend out the window. And they carried us, and then I reunited with my friends, and I was lucky to get out. I was only there for a good 10 minutes, but
we were just dancing on the floor. We heard a couple shots. I told, her to get down, all my friends to get down. We went in behind we stayed behind the stage, got out, went through the kitchen, went through the back door. She got out. I went in, got some more people to get out.
Just emotional sound from all of these people who were inside the club and just experienced chaos and devastation. But we have some new audio now just coming in of scanner traffic from when the calls first started coming in, reporting shots fired at the Borderline Bar and Grill. We're going to have a listen.
All right, and that scanner traffic that we're going to listen to, we believe came from the CHP, and in fact, there were 2 CHP officers who were at a traffic stop, just happened to be nearby when the first reports came in that they needed to respond to the situation at the borderline. All right, I believe we have that scanner traffic now. Let's listen in.
The officer down, advise if it's CHP at the borderline, officer down.
I've only seen one shooter. Unknown if I hit him. 951, 473 is down and unresponsive at the south entrance.
Sound 3 down and unresponsive, the south entrance.
You could hear the panic in that officer's voice as he called in, and it's chilling to hear that. And also we heard the gunfire as well earlier this morning, and the shots that rang out. people thought that the speakers had blown or that it was firecrackers. They didn't suspect gunfire at first, nor would they. This was a family-friendly night, college night. People brought their parents. People came from Cal Lutheran, Cal State Channel Islands, Pepperdine, Moore Park College, all came together to line dance, listen to country music, and just have a nice time together when all of a sudden chaos broke out. And then afterward, we know that the 2 CHP officers and Sergeant Ron Heelys, they all went to borderline where they knew that they had heard gunfire. They knew that there was something going on, but they still went inside anyway to protect the innocent people in there. So that just goes to show you how dedicated our local law enforcement is and just how incredibly brave they are to put themselves at risk just to help others.
And Sergeant Heelys, one of 12 dead. We have an update for the number of people hospitalized. That's been increased to 21 people who are hospitalized with injuries. There were people who were at the nightclub who helped people crawl through windows and escape the patio to get to safety and then carried them to ambulances. We saw at least one young man who had been shot in the torso who was taken to the ambulance. But with 11 innocent people who were just there for a night out and for dancing and music, 11 people passed away from gunshot wounds alone. So some of those people hospitalized could be hospitalized with gunshots. They could be hospitalized with breaks and bruises. We talked to one young woman who she said she was trampled. A bar stool hit her. There was chaos because they couldn't see. The gunman set off smoke bombs to create confusion and chaos and just fired upon a group of people on the dance floor, in addition to shooting the bouncer and the cashier. This was clearly, according to law enforcement, a planned attack.
That's right. They said that they don't know at this point if there is a link to terrorism. At this point, we do know that the gunman has been identified. He used a .45 caliber handgun, which he reloaded several times. And law enforcement also says that he drove his mother's car to this attack, so he lived probably nearby. All right, we do want to show you again the interview we had with a father who was there with his son. Let's listen in.
We heard shots firing, and my son thought it was a joke. He didn't think it was real. I knew it was real, so I just pulled him down and told the girls to the left. I didn't tell them directly, but I was just yelling, "Get down, get down." There was quite a few girls in a group, young girls, and I think they all got out, but they all got downed. And then he kept on moving to the right. He shot the front desk cashier. And then he went to the towards the office and started shooting there, and I saw the people trying to jam into the office and close the door. I don't know what happened. And then he started shooting at the dance floor, walking toward the DJ booth at the upper level, and there was a lower level that the dance floor is, and he was shooting down on the dance floor.
Shooting down on the dance floor.
And he narrowly escaped the bullets, and so did his son. He was briefly separated from his 26-year-old son because he ran straight out. He says he felt guilty that he ran straight out and regretted not going back in to try and save people, but you're just trying to survive at this moment, and was finally able to reconnect with his son. And his son had originally thought it was a joke. A lot of people thought, oh, this has to be a joke. Some of them had survived the Route 91 festival and thought, no way could this happen again.
And it did, unfortunately. President Trump is also weighing in on this morning. He tweeted, "I have been fully briefed on the terrible shooting in California. Law enforcement and first responders, together with the FBI, are on scene. 13 people at this time have been reported dead. Likewise, the shooter is dead, along with the first police officer to enter the bar." He goes on to say, "Great bravery shown by police. California Highway Patrol was on scene within 3 minutes, with first officer to enter shot numerous times. That sheriff sergeant died in the hospital. God bless all of the victims and families of the victims. Thank you to law enforcement." Again, that is from President Trump earlier this morning.
And Sheriff Jeff Dean, he broke down in tears a couple times describing what he called a horrific scene. He said there was blood everywhere, and there are still 11 people dead inside the club and the gunman as well. Sheriff Dean said he's been a cop for 41 years and never thought he would see anything like this. But he says he's learned it doesn't matter what community you're in, it doesn't matter how safe your community is, it can happen anywhere. And Thousand Oaks is known as America's safest city.
This is definitely going to shatter that sense of innocence. You can only imagine the heartache that is going on, not only in that community, but for all the families affected right now by this horrible tragedy. Suzanne, you mentioned 21 people have been hospitalized with injuries. Some of those folks suffered injuries just trying to escape. Some of them were trampled, as we heard from a young woman. Some suffered cuts trying to get out through the broken windows, cut themselves on the glass. But there were other people who stopped to help, who tried to help others get to safety. We heard from a young man who helped push, he said, 30 to 35 people out the window when all this was unfolding.
And that was Cole. He said he saw the gunman before he started shooting, and he said it looked like a normal guy, but then he saw the gunman raise his arm and start firing on people. There was a man who just heard about the shooting and the chaos who came this morning around 3 a.m. and led a people in a circle of prayer at the scene. He says he has 2 friends who he knows passed away here, and he knew Sergeant Heelys. He says they go to the same church, they see each other around town, and he has been coming to the bar for 20 years and had just come out to provide comfort and support to the people he knew.
It just goes to show you what a close-knit community this is, that everybody seemed to know each other. And Sergeant Heelys, he was a member of this community. He lived in Moore Park, on the verge of retirement, just 1 year away, and leaves behind a wife and a son. And as you mentioned, Suzanne, a lot of people came to the scene this morning. They prayed, they held hands, they hugged and cried, and just wanted to be there to show their support. Even though they may not have been personally affected by this, a lot of people just still wanted to show up to the scene just to offer whatever they could. We do know that the hospital was inundated with people, Los Robles Medical Center, and that there may be a need for blood. So if there is something, people have been tweeting us and asking us on social media, what can we do to help? How can we get involved? That may be one way, is to donate blood, because certainly they're going to need all the help they can get up there. But again, this is still a situation that is fresh. Law enforcement agencies are on hand right now trying to piece together what happened. We are learning bit by bit more and more about this gunman. We're told he was 29 years old. He died inside the bar. We don't believe he was shot and killed by officers. They think that he was dead by the time they got there. But nonetheless, we're told that he was 29 years old, used a .45 caliber handgun, used multiple rounds, had to reload, and then also drove to Borderline with his mother's car. So that just goes to show you this was a possibly premeditated attack by somebody who didn't live too far from the scene.
And it's just before 6 a.m., so in just a few seconds we're going to recap, and we know people are just waking up to this news. It's now national headlines because yet another shooting has happened, this in America's safest city, Thousand Oaks, a very tight-knit community where college students were just out for a night of dancing and music. And the update now is 12 dead. That's not including the gunman. So 12 victims here, 21 people hospitalized. Shots originally fired at around 11:20 p.m. last night. We have been on the air ever since this news came in. Many people who were inside the nightclub, college students from nearby schools like Cal Lutheran.
All right, we're going to pull away from our local coverage. This is KCBS. They've been covering this shooting in Thousand Oaks, really wall to wall. But we want to bring it back here. Hi, everyone. I'm Anne-Marie Green.
And I'm Vladimir Dutier. We are monitoring a lot of news for you today, including, on top of the news that Anne-Marie just talked about, the resignation of the Attorney General, Jeff Sessions. But let's begin this hour with the story that we've been covering for you all morning long, that deadly mass shooting at a bar in Southern California. The attack happened last night. We've learned at least 13 people, including the gunman, died at the Borderline Bar and Grill in Thousand Oaks. A sheriff's sergeant who responded to the gunfire is also among the victims.
Police have identified the 29-year-old shooter who opened fire inside the crowded bar, but have not released his name yet. Officials say the gunman did use a smoke device and a .45 caliber handgun. CBS News correspondent Carter Evans has more.
Investigators are now inside the building taking a look at the crime scene, trying to piece back together what happened. From what we gather from witnesses and the sheriff's department, the first calls came in before 11:30 last night. They reported a gunman who walked into this bar, the Borderline Bar and Grill, and opened fire. Witnesses tell us he shot the bouncer at the front door before moving inside and continuing to shoot with an semi-automatic handgun, which he reloaded multiple times. There were at least 11 people that were killed inside the bar. And a sheriff's deputy, a sheriff's sergeant, actually responded to the scene within minutes. He was shot as well, rescued by a California highway patrolman, but he died at the hospital. The gunman was also found dead inside the bar. It's unclear if he was shot in the shootout in the exchange of gunfire or if it was by a self-inflicted gunshot wound. People inside described chaos when the shooting was occurring. They all dropped to the floor immediately and started looking for exits, and there weren't many. So what they did was they took chairs and bar stools and threw them through the windows and climbed out the windows. Now people are trying to come to terms with what happened, trying to regroup, reconnect with friends. Many people have not been able to get in touch with some of their loved ones concerned. They may be among the victims inside. Of course, police still trying to determine who the shooter is and why he chose this location. Vlad and Anne-Marie.
All right, Carter Evans, thank you very much. We want to bring in Ron Heelys. He is a CBS News security consultant and a former assistant director of the FBI. So, Ron, now we know that witness accounts were accurate, that it looks like this gunman used some sort of smoke device in the building. What does that tell you about the planning that may have taken place prior to this shooting?
Well, that's, to me, a very clear indicator beyond the fact that he was armed and sounds like had extra magazines so that he could reload. The notion of bringing in smoke devices to throw and create additional confusion, to create additional opportunities to take people's lives, shows you that he had put some thought into this. I'm sure you can buy in California and other places cheap smoke bombs, something that you might light a fuse with, but to get something that is a little bit more complex that would generate a lot more smoke, probably have to put some effort into shopping for that and checking it out. So this tells me that this person was putting some thought into what his approach was, how he was going to execute this horrific plan.
You know, Ron, we are just still reeling from that attack in Pittsburgh at a synagogue where 11 people were killed. It is, though, very rare, as you can attest with your years of experience, that we will know immediately what the motives are in the same way that we did in that horrific attack at that synagogue, where the shooter essentially called out what he was doing and why he was doing it. But obviously the thoughts are now turning to the motive and why this one particular bar. What are police going to be able to do to sort of piece together this suspect's actions beforehand?
Well, Vlad, certainly they're going through his background right now. He has reportedly been identified by police, not to the media or the public yet, but that gives the law enforcement an opportunity to get back to his residence, get back to his family, try to identify some coworkers. Before that, those locations and those people are surrounded by media asking questions that law enforcement wants to ask first. And as soon as they get their hands on any piece of technology, whether he went in there with a phone on him, some sort of device, they're going to be searching at his residence. And like we saw in Pittsburgh, they're looking for social media. They're looking for those posts before they get taken down. They're working with the tech companies, the social media companies. If they can find it and identify it, they're going to look at this person's online history, the social media history, who they've been communicating with by text, by email, to see what are the drivers here. And so often, as law enforcement has told us, many of these folks have significant stressors in the last year or so of their lives, whether that's financial, a relationship that's gone bad, a divorce, death of parents, something unstable at work, a grudge. They telegraph their intentions very often. There are very often prior threats. So they're going to be looking for all of that to try to piece this together, and maybe it will be very clear before today is done what the immediate drivers were, and I think we're likely to hear more about that today.
So we heard from witnesses earlier about what it was like inside, about how they got out. We want to play a little bit of sound first, Ron.
At the bar, having fun, dancing, and then all of a sudden you hear like the bang bang of the gunshots, and it just started going crazy, and people were pushing. We thought it was a joke. We didn't take it seriously at first. It's kind of like you freeze because it sounded like firecrackers, and you kind of just, like, everyone just dropped down to the floor, and then again, so I thought it was a joke, and we couldn't get out because the shooting was on that side. So then our friends got the bar stools and they started slamming it against the window so we could get out.
It's okay, darling. It's okay. It's okay.
That's how we were able to get out. They broke the window. They broke the window and we were able to climb out and get out.
We're here. We're speaking with this young woman who was one of the ones who escaped. Were you able to see his face at all?
No, because it was like smoky in there as soon as it started shooting. So I couldn't really see much.
Did all of you and your friends get out okay?
We're still missing. We're still missing. We don't know. We don't know where they are. We haven't heard anything.
How many were you?
There's a big group of like 15 of us. It's a big group. We're like a family. We all know each other. We're all friends. We're all family.
Yeah, the thing about this night is that it was a college night, country music night, colleges from around the area. Some of them actually sort of had special buses to bring in large groups of young people. On this special night, they admit people starting from the age of 18. So we're talking about very, very young people in there at the time. And, you know, Ron, when I first heard about this, I couldn't help but to think of the Pulse nightclub and how the shooter in that case had, you know, cased the nightclub, had gone there before. And there's all sorts of stories about, you know, what was happening in his personal life that perhaps his wife didn't know about. And then you have the shooting here. It's a country music bar. In fact, several people who were there last night at the Borderline Bar were also there at the Country Music Festival in Las Vegas when the shooting occurred there. I suppose sort of the question that I'm trying to sort of put together is whether or not this place could have been deliberately targeted.
Well, that could be easily the case. Look, we are in a world, Anne-Marie, where we are surrounded by and we go to on a regular basis relatively soft targets. And you look at the prior mass shooting incidents in America just in the last few years, you see the list is littered with those soft targets, whether it is a place of worship, which we saw with Dylan Roof and in Pittsburgh and in Sutherland Springs, Texas, or a bar, as you mentioned, you know, Pulse nightclub comes immediately to mind when you think of the horrible toll there. Schools, we are surrounded by and we are in soft targets every day. And for me, apart from the repetitive nature of these events, this calls out for all of us to have a plan, to know that we're in a soft target. There's containment that we are standing within. Where are the exits? If I'm going to a theater, if I'm going to church, if I'm going to school, wherever I am, do I know where the exits are? Do I have, you know, a little bit of a plan in the back of my mind? Because not only if you look at the targets, but you look at the locations, they're anywhere. It is anywhere across America. It seems as though we are not safe anywhere we go. All the more reason to have some sort of a plan in the back of your mind. What is my way out of here? And whether it's some madman like this or a fire breaks out, and we've seen some of those horrific incidents too. Okay, what's my path out of here? How quickly can I get there? How quickly can I find a place to hide, to get small? This cries out for all of us to have some sort of a plan while law enforcement evaluates it. And maybe it's time for, we'll see what happens with the social media aspects. You know, what does Congress have to say about this if we find another person who is in sites that bring on hate, that are central to hate?
Yeah.
What do we do about that?
So true. All of these cases we've seen a social media trail. You just think of the most recent one in Pittsburgh.
Ron, I'm focusing on what you were talking about, which is the repetitive nature of these incidents. And then the fact that now, as Americans, we all need to be thinking about this whenever we go into a movie theater, whenever we go into a crowded restaurant or a crowded bar or a nightclub, whenever we go into our places of worship. as we've seen over the last couple of years, not just in that synagogue, the African-American church that was targeted a couple of years ago. I mean, are we just essentially, and you tell me if I'm wrong thinking it this way, but are we just sort of trying to treat the symptoms of a larger issue in this country that very few people want to talk about? Look, I did a story just a couple of weeks ago for CBS This Morning where I watched little 4-foot humans in the 3rd grade try to barricade their door with tables and chairs, and then their teacher tells them to pick up something to protect themselves against a person with a weapon, with a gun. And they pick up pencil books and pencils and scissors, and these little tiny little kids who know exactly what to do, they're in the 3rd grade. They've been doing it since kindergarten, Ron.
Right, and we've come a long way since the 50s, where the mantra for kids in elementary school was duck and cover, and we expected those kids to, that when the nuclear bomb comes, get under your desk, and now they're under a desk for a different purpose, and it is very, very concerning. We have a gun problem in America. We have people who are getting access to weapons in America and doing great harm. That calls for, in my mind, and again, whether Congress or the states take action, there are massive gaps in databases within the FBI's database. That is a collection of state databases of criminal records and sometimes mental health records. There are huge gaps. A recent study in Virginia, 750,000 missing records. Well, that could be somebody with a felony conviction that the FBI has no knowledge of, and so they can't decline on a gun purchase. That has to be fixed, and it has to be fixed soon across America. These social media sites that are fountains of hate. What do we do about that? What's the expectation of the tech companies that run them and profit from them to police them effectively? And what's the responsibility to report threats to law enforcement quickly so law enforcement can take action? We have to fill those gaps. We have to fill them.
Yeah, we definitely do. One of the things that comes out when we have stories like this, situations like this, is just how heroic our law enforcement officers are. And we know now that among the people that were killed was one officer, Ron Heelys. He's a sheriff. The sheriff became actually tearful. The sheriff has known this man for a very long time. He became tearful at the press conference when he talked about him. So let's take a listen.
I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have. Well, the Sergeant Heelys died at the sergeant passed away at the hospital about an hour ago.
Now, what was so amazing about this officer is he was one of the first on the scenes, if not the first. And, training is different now for active shooters. Now, law enforcement officers, they want to stop as many kills as possible. And so he went into that building before he really had significant backup. Give us a sense, Ron. Tell us what officers are thinking when they enter a building like that. Because he was taking a tremendous risk, and there's some reporting that he called his wife before. KCBS was reporting that he called his wife before he entered the building, knowing he was taking a tremendous risk.
Yeah, this is, to me, the definition of heroism, of valor, of bravery. You know what you're likely to face in there. You know that a shooter, certainly if 2 or 3 minutes has gone by and the event is still going on inside, frankly, the shooter has a tactical advantage over the first couple of officers that are entering one of these scenes. So whether you're highly trained SWAT or not, the first responders to these are typically patrol officers. Very often now they have a patrol rifle, but with a high-powered weapon and a shooter that has any sort of concealment, your job as law enforcement is to go find them. And if they are concealed, even partially, you are at a tremendous disadvantage. So here, and my heart goes out to not just the department and the sergeant's family, but the families of all of these kids that were there, lost their kids, or had their kids injured, or witnessed this. This is the definition of valor and heroism. Mm-hmm. This is every cop's nightmare, and now cops across America, as you know, they are training for these scenarios But you're trying to make a good assessment about how quickly you can go in. Do you have enough people? Do you go in by yourself? We saw the criticisms of a school resource officer in Florida for delaying his